All right, welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dive in.
This time, we're heading straight to the NBA. Remember that crazy scuffle? Miami Heat versus the Houston Rockets?
Yeah, benches cleared, the whole thing. It got everyone talking.
Exactly. And not just about who threw the first punch, but what it says about the league itself. We've got a mountain of fan reactions from Reddit, and let me tell you, some of these comments are wild.
Reddit never disappoints, does it?
Seriously. But what's interesting is this one incident has become like a flashpoint. People are arguing about everything. NBA discipline, player conduct, you name it.
It's like this scuffle just, I don't know, it opened up this whole Pandora's box of issues the NBA has been grappling with.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, for anyone who missed it, picture this. Amen Thompson of the Rockets straight up body slams Tyler Herro of the Heat.
Emphasis on slam. That was a rough one.
Oh, for sure. Ejection's automatic, right?
Yeah.
But it's the lead up to the slam that has everyone arguing.
The footage is grainy.
Yeah.
And depending on who you ask, you get a different story.
Okay.
Some people swear Herro elbowed Thompson in the, well, you know where.
Yeah, others are saying Herro was just playing tough D, nothing dirty.
Right, and then you've got Terry Rozier jumping into the mix, which honestly just adds fuel to the fire.
Total chaos.
Yep, and in the end, all three players are ejected.
So that's our scene. Enter the NBA, disciplinary action time. Thompson gets 2 games for the body slam.
Seems reasonable, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't just go around body slamming people. Rozier gets 1 game for escalating things. Then there are fines. $35,000 for Jalen Green, $50,000 for the Rockets coach, Ime Udoka, and wait for it.
This is the one that made everyone's eyebrows shoot up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler Herro, the guy who got slammed, gets fined $25,000.
Now that's where things get interesting. At first glance, it seems like, wait, what? But then you start reading those fan reactions, and you realize there might be more to it.
Like what? Spill the tea.
Well, Herro didn't exactly do himself any favors after the game. He basically admitted to taunting Thompson, which, might have played a role in everything going down.
Ah, the age-old trash talk debate. Is it just part of the game or does it cross a line?
Right. Because some fans are saying it's harmless, just a bit of gamesmanship. Others are saying the NBA needs to come down harder, especially with fines, really discourage that kind of behavior.
And that's where I think it gets tricky for the NBA. They want the passion, the rivalries, all that stuff that makes basketball so exciting. But they also have to protect the players and make sure things don't get out of control.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope. And honestly, how do you even define what crosses the line? You can't exactly put a dollar amount on every trash talk scenario.
It's all about interpretation, which, of course, leads to even more disagreements.
And what makes this case even more fascinating is that it's not just about this one incident. It sparked comparisons to other situations, other players, other punishments. People are trying to figure out there's a pattern here, a consistency problem.
Which is why we're here. We're going to dive deep into all of it, unpack those fan reactions, analyze the NBA's response, and try to make some sense of this whole messy situation.
Let's do it. Buckle up, everyone. This one's going to be good.
This is why I love these deep dives. You start with a simple scuffle, and suddenly you're talking about fairness, bias, the whole culture of the NBA. It's fascinating. But before we get too deep, I need to get your expert take on something. What are the key arguments we need to break down for our listeners? What are the things that really matter here?
Well, for starters, we need to understand how the NBA actually determines punishments. Like, what's the process? Is there a formula? Do they just throw darts at a board? We need to get into the nitty-gritty of the rule book.
The rule book, yeah, good call. Because everyone's throwing around accusations, but we need to know what the actual rules are. What else?
Context, context, context. Every incident happens within a larger story. In this case, you've got the taunting, you've got Thompson's history, the rivalry between these two teams. All that stuff matters.
It's like a puzzle, right? All these pieces fit together, and then there's the elephant in the room, the bias thing.
Ah, yes, the B word. We can't ignore those comments, the ones suggesting that race might have played a role in how the NBA responded.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff. It's tough to talk about, but we can't just pretend it's not there.
Right, we got to be sensitive, but also honest.
Okay.
So we've got a lot to unpack here. The rule book, the context, the bias, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other stuff will come up along the way.
Sounds like a plan. We've got our work cut out for us, but I'm ready to dive in.
Me too. Let's get to it. All right, let's crack open that rule book. Because like you said, we can't just go off of, vibes and feelings here.
Exactly. We need some hard facts. But from what I've seen, the NBA is pretty secretive about how they actually decide on punishments.
Yeah, they don't exactly publish a step-by-step guide, do they?
Not that I've found. But I'm guessing you've done some digging.
Oh, a little bit. I've been scouring past cases,
Hmm.
official statements, trying to piece together the puzzle,
So like NBA detective work.
pretty much. And what I found is that the rule book does actually define fighting, which seems obvious.
Okay, so no punching, kicking, that kind of stuff.
Right, but the definition is pretty broad. It said something like any unnecessary or excessive physical contact.
That's pretty vague.
It is. So a body slam, like Thompson's, that's pretty clear-cut. But when you get into, like, shoves, elbows, those sneaky trips that only the camera catches.
Yeah, that gray area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where things get tricky. Because then you have to look at precedent. How have they handled similar situations in the past?
And that's what a lot of these Reddit comments are pointing to, right? This feeling that there's no consistency.
Right. Like people are bringing up that incident with the Dallas Mavericks where the punishments were way harsher, even though the scuffle itself didn't seem as bad as this one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's where the NBA's lack of transparency really hurts them, I think. If fans understood why certain decisions were made, maybe they wouldn't be so quick to cry foul.
Totally. But even if we had all the answers, there's still the issue of context.
Right, because every incident happens within a larger story.
Exactly. So in this case, you've got Herro admitting to taunting. Now, taunting in itself isn't against the rules.
Unless you're, like, really over the top about it, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a line there. But the point is, even if it's not technically a foul, the NBA can still factor it into the punishment if they think it contributed to escalating the situation.
So it's like a little bit of trash talk is okay, but push it too far and there are consequences.
Right, and that's why you see such a range of opinions on Herro's fine. Some fans are saying he got screwed because he was the one who got slammed. Others are saying, well, he kind of had it coming. Without knowing how much weight the NBA gave to the taunting, it's impossible to say for sure if the fine was justified.
Man, this is complicated. I mean, I thought basketball was just about dribbling and shooting hoops.
If only. But you're right, it's not just about calling fouls on the court. There's this whole other layer of judgment and interpretation that happens behind the scenes.
Which brings us to, well, the most sensitive part of this conversation. The bias thing.
Yeah. We can't ignore those comments from fans saying that race might have played a role in how the NBA handled this. The suggestion that if the players involved were of different races, the outcome might have been different.
I mean, we can't just dismiss those concerns. We know there's a history of racial bias in sports, in society in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to be careful about making accusations without any real evidence.
Right. It's a delicate balance. We can acknowledge the possibility of bias without jumping to conclusions.
And honestly, I think that's where the NBA's lack of transparency really hurts them. If fans understood how they arrived at these decisions, it might help address some of those concerns.
You know, as we're talking, it strikes me that this whole NBA conversation is kind of like a microcosm of what's happening in the world right now. This struggle for fairness, accountability, transparency.
It's true. Sports often reflect the bigger issues we're dealing with as a society. And how we address them within the sports world, it can sometimes offer insights into how we can tackle those same issues in a broader context.
Deep stuff. So we've got these rules, which can be kind of vague. We've got precedent, which doesn't always seem consistent. We've got context, which is always messy. And then we've got this looming question of bias.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. So for our listener who's probably thinking, can I even watch basketball without a law degree? What are the main takeaways? Well, I think the first one is, there's rarely a clear-cut answer in these situations. Human behavior is unpredictable. There will always be disagreements, and that's okay.
So embrace the chaos. I like that. What else?
Second, we got to go beyond those knee-jerk reactions. Dig deeper, understand the rules, look at the context, be aware of our own biases. Critical thinking is key, especially when things get complicated.
And don't forget, we as fans have a voice. We can demand more transparency from the NBA, hold them accountable, and have these tough conversations about how to make the game better.
Right. Our voices matter. We can advocate for change, challenge the status quo, and create a more inclusive and equitable sports environment. This is ongoing conversation, not a finished debate.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about the rule book, the context, the elephant in the room. But there's one more thing I want to bring up. A few fans mentioned this in the thread, and it's this idea that, well, maybe these scuffles, as bad as they are, actually add to the entertainment value of the game.
Oh, that's an interesting one. It gets to the heart of what the NBA is trying to be. Pure competition, or are they also in the business of entertainment?
Because Let's be real. Those NBA fights compilations on YouTube, they get millions of views. There's something about watching emotions boil over even though we know it's not supposed to happen. It's like, I don't know, like watching a car crash in slow motion. You just can't look away.
And that's the tightrope the NBA has to walk,
Yeah.
right? Capitalizing on the drama without condoning violence or putting players at risk, not an easy task.
Speaking of tricky situations, we haven't even touched on officiating, which is a whole other can of worms.
Oh, yeah. Officiating, always a hot topic. It's like you can't even mention the word referee without someone getting fired up.
Seriously, scroll through that Reddit thread. It's complaint after complaint. Blown calls, missed travels, you name it. Everyone's got an opinion.
And it's interesting how this ties back into what we were talking about before, player conduct and all that. Some fans are saying that the way games are officiated, or maybe misofficiated, is part of the problem.
Like, if players don't feel like the game is being called fairly, they're going to get frustrated, maybe even take things into their own hands.
That's the argument. It's like this whole respect the game thing. If the refs aren't respecting the game, why should the players?
But then again, basketball's a fast game, right? You can't expect the refs to catch every single little thing. They're human. They make mistakes, just like the players do.
Of course. Of course. And that's why I think the best conversations are the ones that go beyond just complaining about bad calls. Like, what are the solutions? And actually, there are some pretty interesting ideas in that Reddit thread.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Yeah. Well, some people are talking about more instant replay, making the review process more transparent, even having some kind of accountability system for refs.
I like that. I mean, refs make the calls. They should be accountable, right?
Exactly. And there was one comment that really stood out to me. Someone suggested a player's strike to protest bad officiating.
Whoa, a strike. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it is. Probably not realistic, but it shows you how strongly some people feel about this. And it made me think about the power dynamics in the NBA. Like, the players are the ones putting their bodies on the line, but they often have very little say in how the game is run,
Yeah, that's true. The refs have a lot of power. And as we've seen, when there's this perception that things aren't fair or that there's some kind of bias, it can really erode trust in the whole system.
It can.
Yeah.
And that trust, that's essential for any sport to thrive.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Scuffles, rule books, trash talk, transparency, even the entertainment factor. It's been a wild ride. What are like the big takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, there are no easy answers here. The NBA is trying to juggle a lot of different things: competition, entertainment, player safety. And not every decision is going to make everyone happy.
That's life, right?
Pretty much. But the good news is we can all be part of the conversation. As fans, we have a voice. We can demand more transparency, hold the league accountable, and engage in these tough conversations.
Exactly. Don't just yell at the TV. Use your voice to make a difference.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing: a fair, exciting, and safe game.
Amen to that. All right, folks, that wraps up another deep dive. Thanks for sticking with us.
It's been a pleasure as always.
And until next time, keep those conversations going, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep enjoying the game.